Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time today. Hank, I want to start with you today. Arizona's long been a Republican stronghold, but then 2 years ago, a Democrat named Kyrsten Sinema beat out Martha McSally, and that changed things. What does that mean as we head into yet another Senate race here in the next few days?
Well, I think Sinema's election proved that the right kind of Democrat in Arizona has a path to victory. You know, she didn't call herself a Democrat. She never mentioned party labels. She ran as something between a very conservative Democrat and a very liberal Republican. And that kind of independence works in Arizona. It's kind of what you're seeing this year, the exact same playbook out of the Mark Kelly campaign. And you know, interestingly enough, they're both facing the same candidate who really hasn't changed her approach at all. After she lost the 2018 election, Martha McSally's consultants put the blame on being too closely tied to Donald Trump in a state that doesn't necessarily love Donald Trump. He turned off a lot of independent and moderate Republican voters. And there's an argument to be made that that cost her the election. So, you know, it's all about turnout. It will depend on how good a year this is for Democrats. But I think even if Donald Trump wins Arizona, there's a path to victory for a Democrat in that Senate race.
Steve, what do you say? I mean, this strategy, will it work?
Well, it certainly seems to work well. And going with what Hank said about the playbook, there was that so-called Sinema playbook, which Mark Kelly has followed to a T, and a little bit easier for him because, of course, he doesn't have a voting record. And he is an astronaut and has popularity tied to that. I think that demographic shift in Maricopa County is a huge one. We have only seen once that I can think of, certainly in recent years, the superintendent of public instruction lost Maricopa County, and yet Diane Douglas went on to win the race. Maricopa County is so dominant, and Martha McSally is a wounded candidate. And the fact that she lost last time around to Kyrsten Sinema, she is still in that tweener category between, again, embracing President Trump and not. Mark Kelly, without question, is the favorite in this race. And I still see a scenario where it's possible where Kelly wins and Trump also wins, but the Trump-Biden race should be closer than Kelly-McSally.
Let's talk about that race because there are conservatives and there are Republicans. Are they still on the fence when it comes to Donald Trump? Steve?
Well, there's certainly that case, Lorraine. What has struck me is the numbers we see of favorable versus unfavorable, just generally across the country. And I think Arizona reflects this as well. The president's approval rating never goes higher than 42 or 43%. And yet, at the same time, it stays there, which means people are not deserting him in the same way, certainly over the last couple of years that we've seen. But this is a very different map, a very different state from 2016 than it is now in 2020. Well, you have to have the president getting more people on board other than the loyalists, and especially the reaction to the pandemic, the fact that he's, according to polls, losing senior voters who were so loyal to him, losing white males. That's almost an even split with Joe Biden at this point. And we know how far behind he is, Joe Biden, when it comes to females. So there's a path to victory for the president here, but it's going to be very difficult. I think a lot of it comes down to, do independents swing 70-30 for Biden or more like 55-45? That's going to determine it.
The Democrats, for the first time, have truly put Arizona on their map. There's been some kind of dipping their toes in Arizona in previous elections, but this year they're all in. And I think that investment of resources shows that they believe that they can actually win Arizona. There are a lot of states that they could be fighting over, and they're spending time and money here.
Of the congressional seats, which are up for grabs? Steve, we'll start with you.
Congressional races, Lorraine, there are two that we're looking at really closely. One is CD6, and that comes down to a lot of the fact that Dr. Harold Tippernetti, who's challenging Representative David Schweikert, has raised a ton of money, a record amount of money. And for a Democrat in that district, which even as recently as 2 years ago, Schweikert still won by double digits. He didn't win by 27 as he had in other years, but at least it's around 10 points or so over Anita Malik at the time. And because of his ethics woes, the fact that he actually admitted to 11 violations, had to pay a $50,000 fine, that has made his fundraising pretty tepid, especially for an incumbent. So that being said, that is a Republican-leaning district still, but it's really a toss-up. The one non-internal poll we've seen has Schweikert up by 3, which is within the margin of error. That one's still, that's going to be neck and neck, no question. The other one is CD1 with Tom O'Halloran versus challenger Tiffany Shedd. O'Halloran is pretty moderate, used to be a Republican, then became a Democrat. He's in Congress. That district has a lot of Trump support, but it also has the Navajo Nation. It is, we always joke about that district being the size of many states in the country. So, but Shedd came across very well in the one debate that the two of them did on television, whereas O'Halloran kept getting tied to Nancy Pelosi. We know that's an election year trick, but that's another one. I suspect the incumbents win both of those, but by very, very narrow margins.
Yeah, same. I really think that CD1 is probably not as competitive as it has been in past years. I think this is going to be a good year for Democrats. I think there's going to be, even some voters who will choose the president a bit begrudgingly and maybe feel a little bit empowered to vote across the aisle farther down the ticket. So I think Tom O'Halloran is probably safe. And if I were betting, I would also bet on David Schweikert. But the fact that that district is even being talked about right now says something.
All right, let's move on to some state races. I mean, voters are consumed with the presidency, the Senate, but there are also some state legislative races. We'll be watching. Where does all this money come from?
I think all over the place. We're seeing a massive infusion of money from outside of the state to help out the Democrats because Arizona actually could flip one or both of its legislative chambers for Democrats. We're within 3 seats in the Senate and 2 seats in the House of flipping those districts. And national Democrats look at that and say, hey, bang for your buck. We can get a lot out of spending money in Arizona. And the Democrats have drawn very aggressive maps this year. They are spending money in areas I would have never expected, areas that I literally laughed when they first announced that they were spending money in. But they're doing this based on polling. They're doing this based on some sort of data and metrics that show them that even these districts that 2 years ago would have just seemed far out of reach, maybe this year are worth spending some money in and seeing if they can flip them.
Steve, does Governor Ducey need both houses to remain in Republican control to finish out the remainder of his term?
I would suspect, Lorraine, at this point, that is a pretty good bet. If we see the last 2 years now, again, maybe that's why Governor Ducey is playing so closely to President Trump and greeting him with such enthusiasm when he comes to visit the state, because maybe if President Trump were to win and Democrats were to turn the legislature, maybe the governor realizes his power will be limited. I just don't see a scenario, Lorraine, in which the governor plays nice with 2 houses, the House and Senate, both being in Democratic hands. If one or the other flips, we could see some very interesting political calculus there, because there are some people certainly who are willing to work with the governor on certain things. Maybe we see additional K-12 funding. All that being said, how does the pandemic ultimately make the state budget look? That might make people strange bedfellows as well we haven't seen before.
All right, tens of millions of dollars spent in Arizona this campaign season. Who's the real winner? Hank, start with you.
Not print media. I don't know, the television stations, I guess. I assume they pick up a lot of money. And anytime I turn on the TV, I'm just flooded with political ads. And I know that, a lot of the local businesses that usually advertise can't afford airtime this month. So I guess the political operatives and the television stations are probably the big winners here.
Lorraine, probably people who have DVRs or TiVos, because they can fast forward through most of those commercials. Because when we have spot sets where we have Mark Kelly, pro McSally, then anti-Kelly, then pro Kelly, then pro. But we're seeing 6 commercials in a row of all these campaigns, and it's even for those of us who are junkies, it's a bit much.
My thanks to both of you. We'll have you back, and we'll see if you have any other thoughts post-mortem. Thanks.
Thanks, Lorraine. Take care.
Thanks, Lorraine.